Rishi Sunak, the potential new leader of the country in a few weeks, has decided to do a tell-all interview with The Spectator on lockdowns, their harmful effects, what was going on behind the scenes. And it's all very interesting, but most of all, I think the message that we need to take away from this is that Rishi Sunak is a true British hero who was fighting behind the scenes the whole time for our personal liberties. Or at least that's the impression that I get from the interview anyway. Certainly the impression that Rishi Sunak wants to give off. Before I go further, we've got this recent book club that Carl did with Alexander Adams on his own book called Artivism. And I have actually I've not watched this video yet, but I've taken a quick flip through the book in the office. And it seems really interesting. He's talking about how political activists like Banksy use their art as a way of conveying particular messages, and one of the most effective ways of convincing somebody of something is to entertain them into it using art. You know, it's very difficult to reason somebody out of a position they were entertained into. I forget who said that on Twitter recently, but I read it and I thought it was a very good line, so I'm sorry I'm not crediting that to someone.
I'm going to credit the Radlib just because he's a nice guy.
He's a nice guy. I don't think it was him, though. Sorry, Radlib. But no, so it's very, very interesting, and you should all check that out. Anyway, moving on. So we've got this article, The Lockdown Files. Rishi Sunak on what we weren't told, but we all knew. People like us were warning about this for years while it was all going on. But now we know. Now we know for certain. And to be fair, it's interesting to get a look into what actually was going on behind the scenes, as far as you want to believe Rishi on what he's saying here.
Suddenly it became politically convenient to point out that this was a terrible idea, and then he's like, I was on that side the whole time.
Yeah, of course what he's doing, is part of his campaign for the leadership. He's trying to appeal to the right wing of the party and the voter base who...
You mean the party? Because like the actual Conservative Party members are all like our guys.
Well, yeah, that's
from when
true.
you meet them, but the people, the MPs, are just...
They're useless. They are absolutely useless. And despite trying to make himself seem like the good guy in this article, Rishi just makes himself seem completely useless. I was fighting behind the scenes the whole time. I was trying to fight for your freedoms. Yeah, and you didn't work, did you? It didn't work. We still got locked down for over a year. And anyway, I'll just start off with some of the stuff. So here, Sunak's story starts with the very first COVID meeting where ministers were shown an A3 poster from scientific advisors explaining the options. I wish I'd kept it because it listed things that had no impact, banning live events and all that. It was saying you should be careful not to do this stuff too early because being able to sustain it is very hard in a modern society. So the scientific advice was initially to reject or at least delay lockdown. And to be honest, we should have rejected lockdown from the very beginning, which it seems like we did, and then just kept it at that. No lockdown, not going to do anything. The scientific advice says no, it's not going to do anything, and beyond the scientific advice, it's immoral to force people to stay in their own homes and encourage them to clap like seals every Thursday for the brave men and women of our NHS.
I met a doctor at the conference on the weekend, and he was telling me just like everyone thinks that was cringe. Like everyone in his place of work was just like, yeah, I don't want that.
Yeah, I've met a few people who work in the NHS and I've not heard any of them say anything good about the clapping. But this all changed when the Fire Nation attacked. No. When Neil Ferguson and his team at the Imperial College published their famous Report 9, which argued that COVID casualties could hit 500,000 if no action was taken. Didn't really live up to the hype, did it? I don't know why we keep referring to Neil Ferguson other than him being so incompetent that he just keeps accidentally giving the government reasons to be authoritarian.
I'm going to check what the COVID deaths actually were.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Because
there's just him being like, yeah, it'll be 20,000 if we lock down the entire country. It's like,
Yeah, Neil Ferguson, by the way, for those who don't know, is one of the health advisors who a few years ago, well, I think 15, 20 years ago, spoke about the dangers of mad cow disease, and it ended up in killing a load of cattle unnecessarily. So every single time this man does anything, just assume that he's wrong. But the government goes, you're giving us an excuse to be authoritarian? Fantastic, we'll go along with it. What were the numbers?
So the official figures are 200,000 deaths, but of course that was with COVID, not from COVID, which is a whole other conversation to be had.
Yes.
But then he's just like, yeah, trust me, if we lock down, it'll be 20k, and if we don't, it'll be 500k. And I was like,
so you're wrong both times?
Yeah, I mean, in both ways. You weren't just like slightly wrong, you're wildly wrong.
You're well off, but we still still keep listening to him. That, of course, turned out to be a vast exaggeration of lockdown's ability to curb COVID deaths. Imperial stressed it did not consider the wider social and economic costs of suppression, which will be high. So they say, oh, yeah, we know this could screw over the whole country, but we just didn't care. We didn't consider it.
I love that level of analysis, though. It's just like, how bad will it be for the economy? Yeah, bigly.
Very big. Much bigly.
It's like, you don't actually have any idea, do you?
Mm-hmm. Sunak says, I wasn't allowed to talk about the trade-off. Ministers were briefed by Number 10 on how to handle questions about the side effects of lockdown, and he says the script was not to ever acknowledge them. The script was, there's no trade-off because doing this is for our health, is good for the economy.
Then you resign because this is obviously madness.
We'll get on to that. I felt like no one talked.
Hang on, just for a second. Let's put you in that position, right? And let's say you're a complete bug man and you're just trying to get political power. And you think, okay, this is an event that's going to happen. Clearly, this is the wrong side of it. So I resign now, and in 5 years, when everyone realizes the wrong thing, they put me in power because I can say, look, I was on the right side. And instead of that, like Boris Johnson did when he resigned against Theresa May. And instead you stayed on. So number one, I just don't believe him off the bat.
Oh, of course.
Because Rishi is definitely a bug man that just wants power.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, our government is run by, the foxes, the fox class. And you expect foxes to be somewhat cunning, except all of our foxes have been fed gruel and have brain parasites and have no amount of cunning. So they're all just retarded and stumbling around, defecating on themselves constantly.
It's nice to know you have a high opinion of the ruling class.
I really do, yes. I felt like no one talked. We didn't talk at all about the missed doctor's appointments or the backlog building in the NHS in a massive way. That was never part of it. When he did try to raise concerns, he met a brick wall. Those meetings were literally me around the table, just fighting. It was incredibly uncomfortable every single time. I want to imagine, right, little Diddy manlet Rishi Sunak reaching
But what about the Magna Carta? And everyone else in the room was like, no, evil. No, you were there.
This is for the greater good, Rishi, the greater good.
Rishi was totally there in his King Arthur outfit.
Rishi jumps across the desk and grabs Boris Johnson. You need to listen before it's too late, Boris. You don't understand what you're doing to this country.
Painting the English flag over his face. I was always for English principles and law and whatever, you people, just vote for me.
The rule of law, Boris. Remember.
Oh, God. He's trying.
Someone needs to make that edit. Someone really needs to do
dramatic reading of how Rishi thinks history will remember him.
Yeah, I was very emotional about it. I was like, forget about the economy. Surely we could at least agree that kids not being in schools is a nightmare. Or something like that. It was a big silence afterwards. It was the first time someone had said, yes, I was Spartacus. No, you need to understand, I'm Spartacus. And no one else joined.
I just didn't tweet it at any point. I didn't leak anything to try and help the cause of stopping this. I didn't even have any private conversations that people can recall and then say that, he was totally on our side, bro. But trust me, I was totally on your side, bro.
I mean, the funny thing is that if you go back to around the sorts of time that he's talking about, there are articles like this one from, I think it's Yahoo talking about an article from The Sun, where if you go to the next link, he's warning of the economic and social impact of lockdown. So it seems like he may have,
In what context?
Yeah.
Because remember, he was the chancellor. It was his job to be like, economy might go bad.
Yeah, the only quotes that I've got is, having a difficult economy has an impact on both our ability to fund public services like the NHS, so it's all in service of our glorious NHS, but also on individual people's long-term health outcomes. Because, I mean, anybody could have told you that locking people up indoors for a year probably won't be good for their health.
Yeah, if we don't treat the cancer patients, they might die.
Yeah.
Oh, really? There's a little brain blast there.
Yeah, and then he was talking about his dissatisfaction with 10 p.m. curfews on pubs and restaurants and said, it's frustrating.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. So
it's just like hearing it. It's so stupid.
Yep. Of course it's frustrating, it's difficult, and I wish we didn't have to do these things.
You didn't!
You didn't, Rishi. But now, if we return back to glorious champion, King Rishi Sunak of the modern day era, and the spectator, Rishi freedom fighter Sunak, paints a very different picture. In every brief, we tried to say, let's stop the fear narrative. It was always wrong from the beginning. I was constantly saying it was wrong. I was just always right about everything. Everybody else was just against me. That's right. Vote for me, everybody. I care about your liberties. The posters showing COVID patients on ventilators, he said, were the worst. Oh, it's the worst. It's wrong to scare people like that. The closest he came to defying was in September 2020 when he said that it was time to learn to live without fear, a direct response to the cabinet officers' messaging. They were all very upset about that. That's right. I was just, every single time I was going in, I was throwing punches left, right, and centre. Oh, you need to think about the people, Boris.
Yeah, this totally isn't because I'm losing in the polls against Liz Truss.
Yeah, and number 10 wanted to present it as if it was following the science rather than a political decision. And this had implications for the wiring of government decision-making. It meant elevating Sage. And this is where it does get to some interesting stuff that's less... Well, it's still self-serving, but it's still interesting that you just get it straight from the horse's mouth that, yes, we gave way too much power to Sage. And we... Yes.
So just someone in the chat is like, everyone from the NHS, everything to the NHS, nothing but the NHS.
Pretty much. But yeah, they talk about how Sage was elevated. It became a sprawling group of scientific advisors into a committee that had the power to decide whether the country would lock down or not. There was no socio-economic equivalent to Sage, no forum where other questions would be asked. And I wonder if people were warning that this could happen if you empower Sage so much. That maybe if you just say, oh, we need to listen to the experts and then don't question anything they say, that bad things could happen. We don't get the right answer. I wonder if people were saying this. Moving on, though. So whoever made the minutes for Sage meetings, condensing its discussions into guidance for government, would set the policy for the nation. No one, not even cabinet members, would know how these decisions were reached. But in the early days, Sunak had an advantage. The Sage people didn't realise for a very long time there was a treasury person on all of their calls. A lovely lady. She was great because it meant she was sitting there listening to their discussions. That's right, there was some subterfuge going on and behind the scenes. Callum, Rishi knew what was really going on. He knew the lies that were being spun and went along with them all anyway. It meant that he was alerted early to the fact that those all-important minutes of Sage meetings often edited out dissenting voices. His mole, he says, would tell him, well, actually, it turns out that lots of people disagreed with that particular conclusion, or here are the reasons that they're not sure about. So at least I'll be able to go into these meetings better on. So at least that does seem interesting. It's not too surprising. But yeah, there were people who had a particular agenda in Sage who didn't listen to any of the dissenting voices from some of the other experts and manipulated the minutes of the meeting and government guidance to get their way. Probably people like the communists that people were pointing out were in Sage from the beginning.
I was about to say, like, some people, it was like, we have her name, Susan Mitchie. Like,
I forgot her name, but thank you for reminding me. Yeah, so people like Susan Mitchie absolutely in control of Sage, even if they had people who probably weren't entirely on board with everything. But commie's going to commie. Typically, he said, the ministers would be shown Sage analysis pointing to horrifying scenarios that would come to pass if Britain did not impose or extend lockdown. But even he as Chancellor...
It may become a totalitarian state.
I know. Even he as Chancellor could not find out how these all-important scenarios had been calculated. I was like, summarise for me the key assumptions on one page with a bunch of sensitivities and rationale for each one. Once again, I find it interesting that even despite the fact he's trying to paint himself as this grand hero of British liberties, he's not ever at any point even talking about just the morality of locking people down. He's looking at it purely utilitarian, economic, loss profit position where he's just sort of like, oh, we need to look at the costs versus the benefits. And it's like, yeah, no, maybe we should think about the morality of it. Maybe we should think about respecting people enough to be able to make their own decisions without government fiat choice. But, you know, that doesn't calculate into any of this. And this is why our ruling elite establishment is garbage. Normally, cabinet members were not kept in the loop as the decisions were being made. Johnson's number 10 informed them after the event rather than consulting them. Sunak says he urged the PM to pass the decision to cabinet so his colleagues could give him political cover for rejecting the advice of Sage. I remember telling him, have the cabinet meeting. You'll see. Everyone will be completely behind you. You don't have to worry. I'll be standing next to you, as will every other member of the cabinet, bar probably Michael Gove and Sajid Javid. And, you know, he's banking on the fact that we all hate Michael Gove and Sajid Javid. Like, fair play, Rishi. I see what you're doing right there, you slimy dog, you. But you can't... You can't just try and pin the blame on everybody else as you've been doing. And once again, I picture Rishi as like a Wormtongue character. Like... Wormtongue from Lord of the Rings. He's like groveling, he's whispering in Boris's ear the whole time. Whereas he's trying to make himself out to be the Gandalf the White, bursting in, trying to unleash the truth of the scenario of the whole situation. It's ridiculous. Any point Sunak, and even the Spectator call him out on this, and they say even at any point he could have gone public with all of this, or even resigned. I ask him if he should have done. To quit that way in that way during a pandemic, he says, would have been irresponsible. It would have been irresponsible, Callum. Big deal.
To who?
Big deal. It would have been irresponsible in the short term for his political career.
Yeah, I want actually why. Does he not even explain? Does he just say, oh, it's irresponsible, and then moves on?
That's what it says in this article. That's the most we've got. So, And to go public or let his misgivings become known would have been seen as a direct attack on the PM. So, he only waited.
Yep. If the PM is doing an evil policy that's this big, it's time to resign, and you didn't.
But he didn't want to attack the PM when it was lockdowns or anything like that. But when it came out that Boris had maybe let Pincher live up to his name.
Well, this won't stand for.
Yeah, this is just a bridge too far, my friend.
I'm a member of the Westminster community, so it actually affects me instead of the entire country.
Only now can Sunak speak freely. His chains have been removed from him. His persecution is over. He is opening up, not just because he's running to be prime minister, he says. No, I swear, guys, please come back. It's not just because I'm trying to, get political points here, but because there are important lessons in all of this. Not who did what wrong. Interesting that he just wants to discount that immediately. It's not about who made what decisions and who locked down who.
Government isn't about people making decisions. Government is just getting more power.
Yeah, but how it came to pass that such important questions about lockdown's profound knock-on effects were never properly explored. And that seems to be a bit contradictory, because surely it's on the people in the government to ask these questions and explore these possibilities, but at the same time, they didn't do anything wrong. They may have done some things wrong, guys, but we just got to forgive them. Just got to let it slide, bro. The leader matters. It matters who the person at the top is, he says. Ministers need to be honest about the flip side of any policy, including tax cuts, and that denial always makes things worse, like the way that Rishi himself has never addressed his own role in the rampant inflation we're experiencing by printing loads of money. But that has nothing to do with any of the problems we're facing now. And the other reasons of lockdown...
This is probably the best part of his campaign. I know this is a side thing, but just I was the guy in charge of the economy. The economy is in such a state that I should be prime minister. There's one line of logic.
Genius. And the way that we get ourselves out of this cost of living crisis, more taxes. I need to charge you more for the money that you already own. Brilliant. Absolutely fantastic. We shouldn't have empowered scientists in the way that we did, he says. And you have to acknowledge trade-offs from the beginning. If we'd done all of that, we could be in a different place. We'd probably have made different decisions on things like schools. Could a more frank decision have helped Britain avoid lockdown entirely as Sweden did? I don't know, he says. But it could have been shorter, different, quicker. Even now, Sunak doesn't argue that lockdown was a mistake. And I think that's really all you need to know about this whole interview, is that despite the fact that he's trying to expose the government for what they are, he's not saying lockdown was a mistake. He's not looking at it from a moral angle. He's not even looking at it from a conservative angle. He's looking at it from a pure lost profit angle. And also, he's trying to paint himself as Captain Rishi, the grand hero. He's Spartacus of the of the Conservative cabinet. It's a complete joke. And he says at the end, it was the problem at the heart of the COVID response, a lack of candor. It's just that we weren't open enough, Callum. It's not that we locked you down for a year and gaslit you. It's just we weren't honest enough. And interestingly enough, not surprisingly, Liz Truss has decided to follow suit immediately after, and says that immediately after this interview comes out, she goes, well, actually, it wasn't just Rishi behind the scenes arguing against this. I was also trying to kick up a storm about it as well. She told an audience of Tory party members that she believed ministers did too much during the health crisis. Speaking at the penultimate leadership contest hosting, she argued, on reflection, the measures had been draconian and that she would never impose a lockdown as Prime Minister. You know, I'm beginning to feel like we can't trust these politicians.
Yeah,
Callum.
we don't have this kind of access, but if there are any Westminster journalists watching and go and interview MPs, ask every single one of the ministers in the room when that decision was made if they support it. And if you get literally every single one of them, as they will, now saying they didn't support it,
might be something up. There might be something up.
Even Boris Johnson's like, I wasn't for that. It's like literally you and everyone else in the room are the only ones who voted on it.
And then The Guardian came out with an article trying to refute everything he was saying. It was written by a scientist called Ian Boyd, and I'll translate the article into English for you. Wow, government didn't listen enough to us. That's the whole thing. And I respond to that saying, they shouldn't have to rely on your advice, and I prefer if government never listened to scientists or experts again after the lockdowns. And also, they did listen to scientists, and it didn't help at all. So great. And to show that it didn't help at all, I know we already pointed out that, Neil Ferguson's projections were far off the mark on both sides. Interestingly enough, earlier this year, John Hopkins did a study finding that the lockdowns were ill-founded and did more harm than good. Lockdowns in the Europe and the US reduced COVID-19 deaths by 0.2%.
That's the best possible estimate, I believe, in there.
Yes, that's the best possible estimate. Shelter-in-place orders ineffective, reducing COVID mortality by 2.9% at most. And they conclude just by saying, we found that no evidence that lockdowns, school closures, border closures, and limiting gatherings even had a notable effect on COVID-19 mortality. The study concluded that lockdowns are ill-founded and should be rejected as a pandemic policy instrument.
So it's about 4,000 deaths with COVID, again, not from COVID, saved. In response, we destroy the entire economy and all the deaths therein that are caused by it, which are at the moment still incalculably
And who
large.
knows how many people might die this winter of cold because they can't afford the heating bill.
Like, we already have the number of deaths that are excess. It's like, yeah, okay, that's definitely more than 5,000. Thanks.
So, yeah, don't listen to Rishi, obviously blowing his own trumpet here.
It is good to know, forevermore, if a government ever suggests lockdown policy ever again in all of human history, you just know they're being evil.
Well, yeah.
There's absolutely no science on their side.
Don't let yourself forget that this is what they did to you.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as the premium videos we do, this one on the politics of Fight Club between Harry and Josh. If you want to follow what else Harry's putting out, you can follow him on Getter at Harry Lotus Eater on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.